basically how I didn't want a vaccine damage this child too, and ways that I could heal them, and oh man. The other day a comment dropped into my comment box. I think I'd woken up because of the apnea monitor in the middle of the night, and I was about to go to bed, and I went to check something, and I saw I had a comment, so I clicked over and I read it, and it said something like, "I'm sorry that your girls are vaccine damaged and have autism because you vaxxed them." It was something like that. At some point I might have actually argued with this person, but I just went to like, click, ignore, block. So at that point, the person can't actually see that they're ignored and blocked. If they go to my comment section, it still looks to them like they're there, but no one else can see them. No one else can hear they're crazy. No one else, it's not spreading this whole disease of ignorance throughout the world. It's just that it gets really old, and it's tiresome to have to explain the same thing to someone who isn't listening, because honestly, if you don't listen to your pediatrician, you're not going to listen to me. Please listen to your pediatrician. Please listen to your doctor. They didn't go to school to try to trick you. They didn't go to school to try to manipulate you. They didn't go to school because they want a ton of money from pharmaceutical companies. That's not why people become doctors. I mean, especially pediatricians. It's not why people become pediatricians or family medicine doctors. It's just not. I think that it has to be really, really hard to have that job and to be disbelieved by so many parents and looked on with suspicion by so many parents, and to go to school for that long and have your education doubted by people who have done their research on Google. So over the years, I've had people say things to me like, "Don't you wish you hadn't vaccinated now?" To which I'd say, "Watch me take my next kids and get them all their vaccines, including the flu shot, including Gardasil, every single vaccine, because I don't want them to get a vaccine preventable disease if it can be avoided." Just, it's that easy. And if you've seen my flu video, you know that I feel very strongly even about the flu vaccine as someone who was hospitalized while I was pregnant with the flu that led to a second hospitalization from another complication from the first one, and that ended up from that being on antibiotics for kidney problems for the rest of my pregnancy for 5 months. I don't mess with the flu. It's not something that I want to get again. It's not something that I want any of my kids to get, so we get our flu shots too. But really, possibly the most annoying to me was when Tessie was diagnosed, because when Maggie was diagnosed, I got quite a few messages on Facebook and quite a few emails from people who either wanted to talk to me about vaccines or who wanted to sell me essential oils to cure her. It was just kind of like, I didn't respond to most of the messages. Outwardly, I was pretty public about my stance on vaccines. I didn't hide it. I wasn't super in your face about it, but it was clear to just about anyone who knew me on Facebook, on my blog, that I was for vaccinating and that my kids were being vaccinated and that my kids were still being vaccinated. That I know that's not why my kids are autistic. I gave that first wave of people the benefit of the doubt. Eventually I hid some people on Facebook because I didn't want my entire feed to be anti-vax. And then Tessie was born. I had concerns very early on about whether or not she was on the spectrum. And I had friends very early on who started to write me about the dangers of vaccines. Basically how I didn't want a vaccine damage this child too, and ways that I could heal them, and oh man. And that was really when I did start cutting some people out of my lives because they just couldn't seem to help themselves with whatever their form of Google-fueled research advocacy of pushing against vaccination. Something that I was just completely and utterly opposed to at every single level. I don't believe that there's some huge conspiracy out there. I don't believe that cherry-picking vaccine packets is education. I think that most of our concerns can be addressed by having conversations with our pediatricians and asking questions. And I think that the vaccine schedule was designed for a reason. I don't think that the number of vaccines our children are getting are enough to bring down a horse. And so our girls have never had any sort of reaction from a vaccine. They've never had fevers or gotten sick or had anything happen after getting a vaccine. They've never had any sort of regression or reaction to a vaccine other than crying because, ouch, it hurts. And no, I don't love taking my kids to get them shots, but I do love having kids who are vaccinated who have a lesser chance of getting measles, mumps, rubella, tetanus, diphtheria, pertussis. But I know that vaccines don't have 100% effectiveness, and that's why herd immunity is so important. And that's another reason that I'm so bothered by all of this. And the other reason I am so bothered by it is because there's this demonization of people who are on the spectrum. There's this talk about it like it's the worst thing that could happen to your child. Like it's worse than death. Like it's worse than the measles. Like it's worse than dying from a preventable disease. And that to me is hugely disturbing. If there was actually a link, if there was a small chance my child was going to get autism or a small chance that my child was going to die of pertussis, I would still have gotten her vaccinated. Now there's not. There isn't a link. Study after study has shown that. Wakefield was a dishonest crook who lost his license. He took the words of parents at a birthday party of 12 kids and spun his own conclusions and lied and lost his license. It's ridiculous to take that and build this entire dangerous theory on it that this is where it's coming from. And that brings me to the Gardasil vaccine. I've heard other parents say that they aren't going to be getting their kids on the spectrum that vaccine because they don't need to worry about that. But the thing is that in this life there are a lot of people that aren't good. And as much as I want to be able to protect all of my kids, not all activity of that sort is always consensual. There are people who take advantage of people with disabilities, and I want to be able to guarantee that that is never going to happen, but I can't guarantee 100%. I'm not always going to be here. And that is why I'm going to make sure all of my kids get the Gardasil vaccine, even my kids who may never be able to consent, because I want them to be protected no matter what. I want them to be protected from their own mistakes. I want them to be protected from things that aren't mistakes. I want them to be protected from their partner's mistakes and non-mistakes, and from every choice that they make that might put them in danger. I just want them to be protected, because consent can be a problem in our society, even when the person should never be able to give consent because they don't have the capacity. I hope that's not something that ever comes up. I hope that there's no necessity in our lives for that vaccine with our kids who maybe will never be able to be in that situation to give consent. I won't rule out the fact that there are bad people in this world, and I will do everything that I can to protect them. And part of that means giving the Gardasil vaccine. And that is why I see that as a necessary vaccine for all of my kids. To parents who do buy into this stuff, be careful about how you talk about your kids in front of them and when they're not around. Don't talk about them as broken, as defective, as all of the words that I hear associated with vaccine damage as damaged. That's something that I hear a lot. Don't say things like the light went out of her eyes, or they looked dead inside. My child was gone. Your child isn't gone. Your child is right there. That was always your child, and that's the child that you have now. I understand wanting answers. I've wanted answers too. My husband and I both have the same autosomal recessive gene mutation that is like 1 in 100,000. Like, what are the chances of that happening? Not really high, right? And it's so rare that no one can say exactly what it means. The algorithms say that they believe that it's damaging, but it's so rare that no one really knows, other than the fact that other mutations on that gene have been associated with developmental delays and respiratory issues, And those are two things that we have. But I can say this. I knew that our two girls were different way before they were vaccinated. With Tessie, it was clear from the day that she was born that she was not the same as other babies. And the same with Maggie. I mean, when Maggie was born, I was asking the pediatricians in the hospital if something was wrong with her because she was so unresponsive. Before she had gotten any shots, I realized that she was not the same as other babies. And with Tessie, I knew. I mean, with Tessie, I had a name for it. With Tessie, I knew that this was autism, that she was like her sister. There was no doubt in my mind. When she was a month old, I had talked to so many people and told so many people, I have a baby who's a month old, and I know she has autism. And they were like, okay, crazy lady, you can't know your 1 month old has autism. And I was like, I do. And she does. She was diagnosed at 18 months. The other thing that really, really gets me is that when people use this to prevent babies from getting vitamin K shots, not vaccines, a vitamin K shot. So, at some point in time, we don't know if it was before she was born or after, Tessie had a brain hemorrhage. Her neurologist leans towards before she was born. And we were lucky. It was in a part of the brain that has a lot of fluid, that's made to absorb fluid, and so it shouldn't have affected her at all. But going through that MRI and finding out that she had a hemorrhage, and then having to go back again and have them watch that hemorrhage and take pictures of it just to make sure that it hasn't changed because they aren't totally sure what it is, and to make sure that it hasn't grown, to make sure it's a hemorrhage and not something else, it's really scary. I know it's not fun to have your baby stuck with a shot, but it's a lot better than having to have your baby put under general anesthesia, to have an MRI, to look at the bleed in their brain. It's a lot better than to go through a whole bunch of tests because there's something wrong with your child. And if that happens, if it's something that you could have prevented and you didn't, something you could have prevented with something as simple as a shot, I think that would be really, really hard. At least if it was me, it would be really hard for me to forgive myself. Especially when every single doctor that I know would have been telling me that it was the safest and best thing for me to do for my child. Anyways, hopping off my soapbox, I figured you kind of knew where I stood on vaccines when I made the flu shot video earlier this year. I feel pretty strongly about it. I know a lot of people dread vaccines, but I seriously am impatient for my kids to be fully vaccinated because it's safer. I would rather them be fully vaccinated for these diseases that are beginning to make a comeback as people opt out of being vaccinated. So please don't buy into this whole conspiracy theory rhetoric. It's just not real. Listen to your doctor, listen to your pediatrician. They went to medical school for a reason, went through a residency, and have worked really, really hard to understand medicine. They didn't get their degree online by reading a few studies. Just because a study is online doesn't mean that it is good. Just because somebody has put something out there that has some tiny, tiny sample size doesn't mean that it's valid. And that's, I think, a lot of the time what a lot of people don't get. They'll just pick and choose the studies that support their own conclusions, and not all studies are created equal. So listen to your doctor. They actually understand which studies are valid, which studies had big enough sizes to draw conclusions from, and they can answer your questions. Because we really need to be protecting those people who actually can't be vaccinated. Those people who have medical reasons, who are too young, who are too weak to be vaccinated. Because not everyone can. Not everyone is as fortunate as our family has been so far. Anyways, that's it for today. If you like this video, we'd love it if you give it a thumbs up. I'm pretty sure we're going to get some thumbs down on this one too. And if you're interested in all things autism, we'd love it if you'd hit that subscribe button. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.